G'day guys and gal. Now the dust has settled and the sweet juicy reality of the Lion's return has really hit home, it's time to look into the future and discuss which Loyalist Primarch will return next. After all, I currently have a 100% strike rate so far, so I'm doing pretty well. I do want to note though, since I saw a lot of people being a bunch of Timmies and saying stuff like, well actually Majorkill, it was very obvious that the Lion was going to return, so it's not very impressive that you called it. A broken clock is right twice a day, huh? That is what you sound like. Fuck you. I didn't predict the Lion would return. I predicted the Lion would be the first Loyalist Primarch after Guilliman to return, a prediction I stuck with completely for around 3 years. Now it didn't take a genius to guess that, I'll admit. He was the logical choice. But you need to get your facts right before you talk shit, otherwise you look dumber than a petrol sniffing drongo. Before we get started, we all know that vitamins are important and that we as Warhammer fans are probably somewhat deficient in a lot of them. So we could either A, cop it and slowly die faster than everyone else, B, spend a ton of time and money optimizing the hell out of our diets, which, yeah, nah. Or C, use today's sponsor AG1 to get everything you need in a single glass. Option C is what I go for and what you should too. Basically, it's a powder that is jam-packed with all these important micronutrients. The kind of stuff we need, but we rarely get. The best part is that it's actually quite yum. I personally put mine with coconut water as the pineapple flavor from the AG1 complements it very well. But it's also fine to just have it in water. You could also put it in milk. I personally wouldn't, but hey, I'm not the vitamin police. Juice is actually also quite nice with it. I genuinely feel the difference when I'm consistently taking it and when I'm not. So to sort out your vitamins by getting AG1, as well as a year's supply of immune support D3K2 and 5 travel packs for free, then use my link below. Cheers to AG1 for sponsoring this video. Today we will not only predict which Loyalist Primarch will return and why, but I'll even create a return order list for the Loyalist Primarchs, so that we can look back 30 odd years from now and say, holy shit, Majorkill, you absolute god. You predicted every Loyalist Primarch's exact return order. Let's get into it. To narrow down our options for the next Loyalist to return, let's first eliminate the ones that definitely won't be next. Or at least it would have to be a severely retarded plot twist if they did. Ferrus Manus and Sanguinius are dead. Not like dead like Horus, but pretty fucking dead. That's not to say they will never return. I have an entire video discussing how each Primarch, including the dead ones, can legitimately return based on current lore. But the thing about Guilliman and the Lion was that their returns were quite easy compared to the others. Guilliman was in a near-death stasis on the crag, his own homeworld, whilst the Lion was asleep on the Rock, his legion's main ship. We knew where they were and we knew they were alive. The amount of tomfoolery that would need to occur to bring back Sanguinius and Ferrus is quite a lot. So no, they won't be next. I believe we can also cross off Dawn, as he may be dead and is definitely missing without anyone really knowing where he is. So that leaves us with Jagadai, Corvus, Vulcan and Russ. I don't think Jagadai will be next either, as painting white sucks dick and the white scars have been benched incredibly hard in the lore. He is also most likely trapped within the webway by either Seer Gorach or the Dark Eldar, and since GW doesn't give a fuck about Eldar lore, I think he's going to be stuck there for a while longer. The remaining 3 Primarchs are all legitimate contenders. Vulcan, because he literally can't die, Corvus, since he was last seen going insano style on some word bearers and is likely the reason why Lorga hasn't been seen in a long time, and Russ, because he's on his little quest in the Eye of Terror, maybe even trying to find Isha to heal the Emperor. It really depends what GW wants to do. Bringing back Vulcan or Corvus wouldn't have as much effect on the setting as Russ, so if they wanted to bring back a Loyalist Primarch without a massive status quo update, then they would be the better options, but if they wanted a bit of a shake-up, then Russ would be the better choice. GW does like to make my job hard, as the recent Primarch vs Primarch matchups have been kind of random. You would assume that ancient grudges would need to be settled. Guilliman and Lorga, Magnus and Russ, Angron and literally anyone. But instead, the recent Primarch battles have no real history. Guilliman and Mortarion weren't very involved with each other during the Great Crusade or Horus Heresy. G-Man and Magnus also had no real beef either, and actually respected each other before the Horus Heresy. On top of that, Angron and the Lion never had any interactions or conflict in the past either. So we can't just assume that because Lorgar might be the next traitor Primarch, Corvus will be the next Loyalist. It pains me to say this, since Valrak, that lovable old bastard, predicted the same thing a few days ago, but I believe and predict that Leman Russ will be the next Loyalist Primarch to return. The Space Wolves are a fan favourite, Russ has an interesting dynamic with the Lion and Gilliman, interesting is putting it lightly, the Lion fucking stabbed him, plus the journey Russ has undertaken would be very interesting to have a look at. His interactions with the traitor Primarchs like Magnus or Angron, two guys that he has bad blood with, would also make for some great lore. On top of that, his return is somewhat prophesized. Russ said before he left that during Mankind's darkest hour, he would return to lead his legion for the final battle. Well, the hour is pretty fucking dark, Russ. On top of that, every few centuries, the rune priests of the Space Wolves will receive visions that guide them to defeat a powerful foe or protect something important. It's thought that these visions come from Russ directly, as the visions have Russ speaking. So yes, due to Russ being easily set up to return in the lore, his popularity amongst the fandom, his engaging dynamic with the Lion and Gilliman, as well as his history with some of the returned traitor Primarchs, I strongly believe and predict that Russ will be the next Loyalist Primarch to return. But what about after Russ? Who will be next after the Wolf King returns and Wolf on D's nuts? Realistically, it's between Corvus and Vulcan, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Corvus. He would be a great Primarch to bring back around the same time as Lorgar. His return wouldn't be as big as the previous 3 Loyalist returns, however by that point the novelty would have worn off a bit, so GW wouldn't need these big setting shaking returns. After Corvus, the next return would most likely be Vulcan. However, since this is probably like 10 years later, a lot of things could have happened which would make the return of Sanguinius, Dawn, Jagadai or even Ferris a lot more probable. But hey, it wouldn't be very epic if I waited 3 months before the Primarch's return before calling it. After Vulcan, I reckon it would be Jagadai. The Khan got quite popular during the Siege of Terror books, and he is now a fan favourite amongst the setting, so whilst I wouldn't be shocked if he returned sooner, I have him pegged after Vulcan. From there, it'll be Dawn, then Sanguinius, then Ferris. Dawn because he can kind of return whenever the writers feel like it, since he is currently missing in action rather than KIA, Sanguinius before Ferris, as we do actually have a genuine Sanguinius resurrection on the cards. It's been made clear that elements of Sanguinius' soul still exist and are somewhat active, since Dante got those visions from Sanguinius and was restored to life because of them. With the Sanguinor being Sanguinius' light, Mephiston being his darkness, and Dante also being involved, if those 3 figured out how to do a fusion dance or some shit, the result would most likely be Sanguinius, or a version of him. Once again though, this requires some serious wank writing, as well as the deletion of Dante, Mephiston and the Sanguinor from the setting, 3 characters that have tabletop models. The closest we would get in my opinion would be a temporary avatar of Sanguinius created through the combined effort of the 3 Blood Angels. However, with how popular Sanguinius is and how well a model of him would sell, it's definitely not off the cards. Ferris would be the last to return. A, because no one really gives a fuck about the Iron Hands, B, no one really gives a fuck about Ferris, and C, there is currently no method in the setting that can give him a genuine resurrection. Malcador and the Emperor did mention that given enough time, they could bring Ferris back to life, most likely by creating a new vessel for him, then coaxing his warped god soul back into it. But that requires the undivided attention of a living Emperor, so the Emperor would need to come back to true life for that to occur. In fairness to Ferris, the Emperor was able to temporarily bring him back to life during the War in the Webway as a headless flaming demon, but I wouldn't call that a permanent solution. Ferris's death was used as a way of creating some hectic stakes at the start of the Horus Heresy, and as an unfortunate result of that, I don't think we will ever see Ferris return. And if he does, it'll be fucking ages from now. So, the first to return now that the line is back will be Leman Russ, the second will be Corvus Corax, then Vulcan, then the Khan, then Dawn, then Sanguinius, and lastly Ferris. I swear to fuck, if I get this return order right, everyone's gotta gargle my major minis. You gotta buy a major mini or gargle my balls. If things obviously change, which they probably will as the lore goes on, I may adjust my return order, but for now this is the best I've got with the current lore we have. It's hard to know if GW have really kicked into gear with bringing back the Primarchs in a big blitz, or if the Lion is the last in this group and we will need to wait another 5 years or so before we see Perturabo, Fulgrim, Lorgar and Russ. I don't have any inside informants or anything, so your guess is as good as mine. I do want to quickly mention a bit of an anomaly. the uncorrupted clone of Fulgrim. Fabius Bile made a clone of his Primarch that was perfect. It had the Primarch special source, and for all intents and purposes, was Fulgrim. As it is uncorrupted, it has a good chance of helping the Loyalists. However, Fulgrim was created as a plot device for the Fabius books, with the author of those books then leaving Black Library. Other authors in Black Library have stated that when a particular author creates a wacky and interesting plot device or concept, they don't fuck with it or try add their own source to it. They let that author dictate the concept. Clone Grim is a prime example of this. However, if GW decides that Clone Grim needs to come back and get a model, then he will come back and get a model. The author of the Fabius books doesn't own the rights to Clone Grim. Even if Clone Grim did return though, I wouldn't consider it the return of a Loyalist Primarch, so for now, Clone Grim can sit in Trezin's museum and look pretty. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up a Major Mini. The Space Elf Firelord has just launched and it's honestly one of my favorite models to date. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more loyal content. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.